Hollywood has always been a land of smoke and mirrors. It's a place where on-screen chemistry can hide off-screen drama and where big smiles can mask bigger resentments. For over 6 decades, Sally Field has been one of its brightest stars, America's sweetheart, the Gidget who grew up to become a 2-time Oscar winner. She's worked with pretty much everyone, but now, at 78 years old, the time for playing nice is apparently over. For years, she stayed quiet about the difficult, dismissive, and downright hostile men she met on her way to the top. Now, the secrets are starting to come out. You've probably seen the headlines and the clickbait thumbnails promising a hate list from Sally Field herself. The internet is buzzing with the story that she's finally named the 7 actors who made her life a nightmare. But is that the real story? Is it just a simple list of people she didn't like? The truth, as it usually is in Hollywood, is way more complex, more shocking, and a lot more interesting than any headline. We've gone through her own words, her revealing memoir In Pieces, and decades of interviews to get the real story. We're counting down the 7 most challenging and complicated professional relationships of Sally Field's career. These are the stories she's finally telling, and the reasons behind them are more dramatic than any movie. Kicking off our list is a name you'll see all over the internet gossip pages, often labeled as one of Sally Field's most difficult co-stars, the legendary James Garner. The story usually goes that their collaboration on the 1985 romantic comedy Murphy's Romance was frosty and miserable. The rumors paint Garner as this emotionally distant and uncooperative scene partner, making the whole experience a nightmare for Field. It's a juicy story, right? The charming hero from The Rockford Files being secretly cold behind the scenes. Well, here's the shocking truth. It's completely false. This rumor is a total fabrication, and it stands in stark contrast to what Sally Field has said over and over again about James Garner. She didn't hate him. She absolutely adored him. The fact that this feud narrative is still floating around just shows how easily gossip can take on a life of its own. So, how did the story get so twisted? Maybe it was the film's May-December romance plot, which was a little unconventional for the time. Or maybe it's just that Hollywood gossip loves to tear down beloved figures. Whatever the reason, the facts tell a very different story. Sally Field didn't just enjoy working with James Garner. She has consistently called him one of her favorite collaborators. In fact, when Andy Cohen asked her in a 2016 interview to name her best on-screen kiss, she didn't even hesitate. It wasn't her famous flame Burt Reynolds, it was James Garner. She called him a diamond and said the kiss in Murphy's Romance was the best she ever had on film because of the trust and respect he showed her. She felt safe with him, which was a rare feeling in her career. She's the one who fought for him to be cast as Murphy in the first place. The studio apparently wanted a younger, flashier star, but Field stood her ground, even threatening to walk if they didn't cast Garner. Does that sound like a woman who couldn't stand her co-star? Not at all. So let's start by setting the record straight. The feud with James Garner is pure fiction. The truth is a story of deep professional respect and genuine affection. Long before Sally Field was an Oscar-winning Hollywood legend, she was a young actress desperate to shake off her squeaky clean image from Gidget and The Flying Nun. In 1972, she landed a gritty role in a TV movie called Say Goodbye, Maggie Cole, hoping it would prove she was a serious dramatic actress. It was a huge moment for her. Her co-star was Robert Blake, an actor already infamous for his intense, volatile personality. This wasn't just a challenging role for Field, it was an early, brutal lesson in how to handle Hollywood's biggest. Ego's Robert Blake was known for being a ticking time bomb on set. He was a method actor who completely blurred the line between his character and himself, and he dragged everyone around him into his chaos. For the cast and crew, this meant constantly walking on eggshells. Blake's moods reportedly dictated the entire atmosphere. He was known for explosive outbursts and for being mercilessly critical of other actors who didn't meet his impossible standards. For a young Sally Field, trying so hard to be taken seriously, this environment was terrifying. While she hasn't spilled every last detail, stories from that set paint a picture of a toxic environment, all created by its lead actor. Crew members have described Blake deliberately trying to sabotage scenes to get a more authentic reaction out of his co-stars. This wasn't collaboration, it was psychological warfare. He'd go off script, throw insults, or create conflict just for the sake of the craft. Field, ever the professional, had to learn fast how to hold her ground without making things worse. She had to protect herself and her performance from a co-star who seemed to run on conflict. Some online rumors even claim the movie was never finished because of the turmoil. That part isn't true. Say Goodbye, Maggie Cole aired in 1972. But the fact that the rumor exists tells you everything you need to know about how difficult that production was. Working with Robert Blake was a learning experience for Sally Field, but not a good one. It was a harsh introduction to the dark side of Hollywood, and it taught her exactly what kind of behavior she would never tolerate on a set again. By the time Sally Field's career was in full swing, she was known as a powerhouse of emotion and a total professional. But Hollywood is full of different working styles, and none is more famous or polarizing than method acting. This brings us to another legend who has been tangled up in rumors of a difficult collaboration with Field. Dustin Hoffman. For years, whispers of a tense dynamic between Field and Hoffman have made the rounds. The story goes that Hoffman, a famously intense actor, was overbearing and controlling on set, needing to dominate every scene and leaving Field feeling frustrated and humiliated. It's the classic story of two titans clashing, a battle between two very different approaches to acting. And let's be honest, Hoffman's reputation precedes him. We've all heard the stories about his on-set clashes, like the legendary drama with Meryl Streep during Kramer versus Kramer. But when you actually look for Sally Field's own words on this supposed feud, the trail goes cold. Unlike other cases, where she's been open about difficulties, Field has never publicly accused Hoffman of humiliating her. So why does the rumor stick around? It likely comes down to a fundamental clash of creative styles. Sally Field's approach is built on preparation and collaboration. She shows up, knows her lines, and is ready to work with her scene partners. Hoffman's method, on the other hand, is famously improvisational and can feel confrontational. He's known for trying to provoke real reactions from co-stars, sometimes using off-camera tactics that can feel disrespectful to actors who aren't on board with it. It's totally plausible that their working styles were just oil and water. An actress like Field, who values a stable, respectful environment to do her emotional work, could easily have found Hoffman's methods chaotic. The tension, then, probably wasn't about personal hatred, but about a fundamental disagreement on how to get the job done. It was the collision of two different artistic philosophies. Some actors intimidate with their physicality, others with their explosive tempers. And then there are those who use their intellect like a weapon. That brings us to number 4, the brilliant but notoriously difficult James Woods. When Sally Field starred opposite him in the 1982 comedy Kiss Me Goodbye, she was already a 2-time Oscar winner. And yet, according to multiple insider reports, her experience on that set was a masterclass in being made to feel small by her co-star. James Woods has a formidable reputation in Hollywood, and not just for his talent. He's known for his genius-level IQ and an abrasive personality that loves to challenge everyone on set. He debates directors, questions scripts, and is known to be incredibly critical of his fellow actors. For Sally Field, who was fighting to maintain her creative authority, Woods's behavior was reportedly a constant source of stress. The story from the set of Kiss Me Goodbye is one of psychological intimidation. Insiders claim Woods would talk down to Field, openly questioning her acting choices and making her feel foolish. He was allegedly dismissive of her ideas and needed to be the smartest guy in the room at all times, even if it meant crushing his co-star's confidence. Now, it's important to say that Sally Field herself has never launched a public takedown of Woods, but she has talked about working with male actors who felt the need to belittle her, who ignored her input, and forced her to fight twice as hard to be heard. The alleged dynamic with Woods fits this pattern perfectly. It was a classic case of a male actor using his intellect to assert dominance over an accomplished female co-star. The most extreme stories remain insider claims, but the sheer volume of reports, combined with Woods's long-standing reputation, paints a pretty clear picture. It was a battle of wit she never wanted, and another harsh reminder that even with 2 Oscars, respect in Hollywood was never a guarantee. Before we get to our top 3, including the one man whose complicated and controlling love nearly broke her, we want to hear from you. If you're finding this look behind the Hollywood curtain fascinating, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories you only thought you knew. Ring that notification bell so you never miss an update, because the stories only get more intense from here. Sometimes on-screen pairings are just electric. The chemistry is so real you can't help but get swept up in it. And then there are pairings that are so painfully awkward, you can feel the chill through the screen. That was exactly the case with the 1981 film Back Roads, which paired Sally Field with the famously gruff Tommy Lee Jones. Their collaboration wasn't just difficult. By Field's own admission, it was an absolute disaster of anti-chemistry, leading to what she later called the single worst on-screen kiss of her life. Going into Back Roads, Field was a huge star. She was America's sweetheart with a shiny new Oscar. Tommy Lee Jones was still a rising actor known for his intensity. The movie was a gritty rom-com about a prostitute and a boxer falling for each other on the road. The entire movie depended on the chemistry between the 2 leads. The only problem? Off-camera, there was zero chemistry. In fact, it was more like mutual repulsion. Field has been brutally honest about working with Jones. She described him as cold, distant, and totally uncommunicative. No friendly banter, no trying to build a rapport. He was just an island of brooding silence, which made their scenes together incredibly awkward. The director, Martin Ritt, was reportedly furious, knowing the film's central relationship was a dud. The absolute low point came during their big romantic scene. Field recalled years later that the kiss was a nightmare. She said he was like a block of stone, completely unresponsive. It was so bad, so devoid of any passion, that it became a running joke for her. When asked about her worst on-screen kiss, she doesn't miss a beat. The answer is always Tommy Lee Jones, but this story has a surprisingly redemptive ending. Years later, Tommy Lee Jones approached Sally Field at an event. He was a major star by then. He came up to her and apologized for his behavior on Back Roads. He admitted he'd been going through a hard time in his personal life and knew he had been awful to work with. Field was deeply moved. It took a lot of character for him to own up to his behavior after all those years. She accepted his apology, and it brought a sense of closure to a really unpleasant experience. It was a reminder that the actors on screen are real people, fighting their own battles. Most of the conflicts on this list came from a clash between 2 actors, but often, the most damaging experiences in Hollywood come from the person with all the power, the director. At number 2, we have a figure who might be the most insidious of all, because he remains nameless. In her memoir and interviews, Sally Field has spoken about a director whose cruelty left a profound scar, a man who represents the systemic misogyny. She fought against her whole career. Field has called this experience one of the most painful of her professional life. This wasn't about creative differences. This was, in her words, pure cruelty. She describes a director who seemed to enjoy humiliating her and undermining her confidence. He would criticize her in front of the crew, dismiss her ideas, and treat her like a prop instead of a collaborator. This abuse of power was disturbingly common in old Hollywood. The director's word was law. For an actress, Even a successful one, challenging a powerful male director meant risking your entire career. By being labeled difficult, Field was stuck. Endure the humiliation or speak up and risk everything. This experience was a brutal lesson in the power dynamics of the film industry. It taught her that talent wasn't enough to protect her. She realized she had to develop a backbone of steel to survive in a system that was often designed to diminish women. The cruelty of this unnamed director wasn't just a personal attack. It was a reflection of a culture that often saw actresses as less intelligent and disposable. Her decision to speak about this, even without naming him, is powerful. It's not about revenge. It's about exposing a pattern of behavior and validating the experiences of so many other women who suffered in silence. The director's name doesn't matter as much as what he represents, a patriarchal power structure that Sally Field had to fight every single day. And now, we've arrived at number 1. The man who holds the most complicated, influential, and ultimately, the most painful place in Sally Field's story. Burt Reynolds. To simply say she hated him would erase the complexity of a relationship that defined a huge part of her life. Theirs was a legendary Hollywood romance. But behind the charming Smokey and the Bandit fantasy was a much darker story of control and a love that was, in Field's own words, confusing and complicated, and really, really damaging. They met on the set of Smokey and the Bandit in 1977. Reynolds was the biggest movie star in the world. Field was the respected actress trying to build a serious career. On the outside, they looked perfect. Their on-screen chemistry was electric, and it exploded into a real-life romance that captivated the world. They made 4 movies together and, for 5 years, were the most famous couple on the planet. But as Field reveals in her stunningly honest memoir, In Pieces, the reality was no fairy tale. Reynolds was deeply controlling. He treated her less like a partner and more like a possession. He wasn't interested in the independent, ambitious parts of her. He wanted her to stay the adoring, less famous girlfriend, and he could not handle her growing success. The turning point came in 1980 when Sally Field won her first Oscar for Norma Rae. This should have been a moment of shared triumph. Instead, it blew up their relationship. Reynolds didn't go to the ceremony with her. As she stood on stage giving her iconic, "You like me, you really like me" speech, the man who claimed to love her was nowhere in sight. Field later said he was not happy for her at all. Her success was a threat to his dominance, and he made her feel it. On set, he could flip from charming to cold and dismissive in a second. He undermined her confidence and made her feel small. She eventually realized he was a deeply insecure man who projected all of that onto her. He may have loved her in the only way he knew how, but it was a possessive, conditional love. He wanted to keep her in a box, but her talent was just too big to be contained. It wasn't simple hatred. It was the heartbreaking process of surviving a controlling love to find her own power. So is there really a Sally Field hate list? No. The story of her difficult collaborators isn't about hate. It's about resilience. It's the story of one woman's journey through a notoriously tough industry. From debunking myths about colleagues like James Garner to navigating the egos of men like Robert Blake and surviving the complicated love of Burt Reynolds, her career has been a masterclass in integrity. When you look past the clickbait headlines, you don't find a list of enemies. You find a series of battles that forged one of Hollywood's most respected icons. She faced condescension, disrespect, and a system that wanted her to be quiet and pretty. And through it all, she didn't just survive. She triumphed. She claimed her voice, her power, and her own story. The men on this list weren't just co-stars. They were catalysts. They were the fire that forged her. Sally Field didn't just win 2 Oscars. She won the much harder battle for her own narrative. What do you think? Are there other famous Hollywood relationships that are more complicated than they look? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.